We're going back to 1952, cracking open the production files and pulling out the 10 facts that never made it into the press kit. Let's start with a car.
Let me out! Let me out!
Another few seconds and it would have been too late, Superman.
Number 10. The car nobody ever noticed. Every great newsroom has a set of wheels, and Metropolis was no different. Except the Daily Planet's ride turned out to be one of the most quietly stylish vehicles in 1950s television. The production outfitted Clark Kent, Lois Lane, and Jimmy Olsen with a 1950 Studebaker Commander. This wasn't a generic studio pool car. It was a genuinely distinctive machine, all clean post-war lines and chrome trim, and it became a recognizable fixture rolling through TV's Metropolis. Before superhero franchises had merchandise tie-ins and custom-fabricated hero vehicles, a real American production car was doing the heavy lifting. Here's the thing. The Studebaker company itself would fold within 12 years of this show's premiere. The car that quietly carried America's favorite reporter through Metropolis is now a collector's piece, which means every episode featuring that commander is also an accidental time capsule of an automobile brand that didn't survive the decade. Nobody planned that. The Daily Planet sedan turned into history without anybody writing a memo about it. Consider it the show's most unintentional prop, and arguably its most durable one.
That wheel'll just take us half as long.
But you don't understand. Shopping is...
Number 9. 2 shows hiding inside one. Most people picture Superman in vivid primary colors, which means most people are only remembering half the show. The first 2 seasons of Adventures of Superman were filmed entirely in black and white. It wasn't until 1954 that the production made the transition to color. The show essentially lived 2 separate visual lives, and most casual viewers never registered the dividing line between them. Because the early seasons were black and white, the costume department had to engineer the suit for monochromatic contrast rather than color accuracy. The familiar blue and red wouldn't read correctly on film without color. So for 2 full seasons, audiences had no idea the suit looked nothing like the comic book version. They were filling in colors with their imagination, and filling them in correctly, which says something remarkable about how powerfully that costume had already embedded itself in the American mind before the TV show even existed. When color finally arrived in 1954, the suit got its upgrade. But the black and white seasons were already locked into television history. Number 8. The Rogues Gallery that never showed up. Every comic book fan tuning into this show in 1952 was waiting for Lex Luthor to walk through the door. They waited the entire run of the series. Adventures of Superman made a deliberate creative and budgetary decision to sideline Superman's classic supervillains almost entirely. Instead of Luthor, Brainiac, or any costumed antagonist from the source material, the show populated Metropolis with gangsters, saboteurs, corrupt politicians, and the occasional mad scientist. The threats were grounded, recognizably human, and critically, much cheaper to produce. This choice also reflected something real about post-war American anxiety. In 1952, gangsters and saboteurs weren't abstract. They felt like things that could actually exist on your block. A show about a man who defeated that kind of threat week after week hit a different nerve than a costumed nemesis could. The decision to drop the Rogues Gallery wasn't a failure of imagination. It was a surprisingly accurate reading of what the audience actually needed Superman to fight.
But Clark, how do you know this happened to Superman?
Oh,
Number 7. Superman never actually hurt anyone. There was a moral architecture built into this show that most viewers absorbed completely without ever being told it existed. A core principle of the 1952 Superman was a strict code against directly harming human beings. When confronting criminals, he would disarm them, restrain them, or use a forceful shove to end the threat. But the show drew a consistent line at lethal or even seriously injurious force. He was a protector operating within a framework of restraint, not a weapon pointed at whoever the script designated as the enemy. This wasn't just a moral nicety. It was a structural decision that shaped every single action sequence. The writers had to engineer confrontations Superman could resolve without crossing that line, which meant the show quietly demanded more creative plotting than a simple Superman punches the bad guy resolution would have required. In an era of constant scrutiny from parent groups and broadcast standards bodies, that rule also served as a shield for the production. It worked on both levels simultaneously. That's not an accident. That's a room full of writers who understood exactly what they were building.
Now let's go collect our $3 million.
Superman!
Number 6. The world's strongest man couldn't swim. The Man of Steel could bend steel girders, outrun locomotives, and stop a runaway truck with his bare hands. Getting into a swimming pool was apparently a different matter entirely. George Reeves could not swim. This wasn't a minor inconvenience. It required careful logistical planning whenever a script called for anything water-related, adding production complexity to scenes that might otherwise have been straightforward. The team had to engineer workarounds for the invulnerable hero every time water entered the equation. There's something genuinely poetic about this that gets funnier the longer you sit with it. The character Reeves was playing could survive a nuclear blast, but the actor needed the production crew paying close attention the moment someone scripted a scene near a dock. What looked effortless on screen was, in at least one very specific way, genuinely dangerous off it. It also makes Reeves' dedication to the role even more impressive. He showed up, suited up, and made it work regardless.
Star of Superman.
You know, there's something mighty interesting going on around my town.
Number 5. The cereal company running the show. The show's primary sponsor wasn't a network executive in a suit. It was a cereal company, and it was doing a lot more than buying commercial time. Kellogg served as the original primary sponsor of Adventures of Superman, and the partnership extended well beyond 30-second spots. Kellogg's integrated Superman directly into their cereal boxes and promotional campaigns, making the Man of Steel a fixture of the American breakfast table in a way that blurred the line between entertainment and marketing in a manner that feels remarkably contemporary. In early 1950s television, that kind of sponsorship arrangement was total. Kellogg's investment was part of what kept the show economically viable in the first place. Superman was, in a very real sense, fueled by cereal. Every box of Kellogg's product on a grocery shelf in 1952 was carrying a piece of the Man of Steel into American homes. That's not marketing trivia. That's television history hiding in plain sight on a breakfast shelf. Number 4. Flying was genuinely miserable. Making a man appear to fly on a 1950s budget required the kind of stubborn ingenuity that would be immediately greenlit as a documentary today. Reeves's cape was constructed from heavy wool, not the lightweight synthetic fabrics that would come later. Flying stunts required a combination of trampolines, wire rigging, and flat-against-a-screen positioning for rear projection effects, all while wearing a costume that was physically uncomfortable under studio lighting. The production team was engineering the illusion of effortless flight using technology closer to a circus rigging crew than anything resembling modern visual effects. Audiences in 1952 believed it. Children believed it enough to attempt their own versions, which connects directly to Fact 2, so keep that in the back of your mind. The gap between what the crew had and what they achieved is genuinely impressive, regardless of what decade you're watching from. That's not a limitation of the era, that's craft. Number 3. The role that changed hands once and stuck forever. Two different actresses played Lois Lane in this series, but history only really remembers one of them, and the reason why is more interesting than a simple casting story. Phyllis Coates originated the role, bringing a sharper, more combative energy to the character. When Noelle Neal took over for the majority of the series' run, she brought something distinctly different. A Lois Lane who was tenacious, warm, and perpetually one step behind Clark Kent's secret. Always hot on Superman's trail, always convinced the next story was right in front of her, never once suspecting that her mild-mannered colleague was the hero she was chasing across Metropolis. Neal's version became the definitive template for the role in ways that echo forward through decades of subsequent portrayals. The specific combination of professional determination and personal obliviousness she built into Lois Lane became franchise DNA. It also set a standard that every actress who played the role afterward had to either honor or actively argue against. That's an unusual kind of legacy for a supporting character on a 1950s television budget. Noelle Neal earned it.
Miss Lane, come out of there.
Number 2. The warning they had to add. At some point during the early run of the show, studio executives received reports they could not ignore, and the response ended up permanently embedded in the opening credits. Children were attempting to fly like Superman. Some of those attempts resulted in injuries. A disclaimer was added, explicitly stating that Superman was a fictional character and that his abilities were not to be imitated. This was a production team acknowledging, publicly, that the show had worked too well. The wool cape, the trampolines, the wire rigs, convincing enough that children were treating Superman as a real operational manual. The disclaimer wasn't a failure. It was evidence that the show had done its job almost too well. It also represents one of the earliest documented instances of a television production adding a formal safety warning in direct response to audience behavior. That predates every "do not attempt" graphic you've seen on an action sequence for the last 60 years. This show was the reason that practice exists at all. Number 1. The show didn't end, it just stopped. There was no series finale, no farewell episode, no moment where the Daily Planet staff gathered for a proper send-off. The show simply reached a point where continuing it stopped making sense, and then it didn't continue. Adventures of Superman concluded in 1958, driven by forces accumulating for years. Budget cuts had progressively constrained what the production could accomplish, and George Reeves, the man who had given Superman his face and his particular brand of calm, immovable decency for 6 seasons, had grown deeply frustrated. The role had typecast him in ways that limited his career options, and his salary hadn't kept pace with the cultural footprint the show had built. The combination brought the series to a quiet close rather than any planned ending. The mismatch between the show's cultural impact and the circumstances of its conclusion is what makes this land so heavily. A program that shaped how millions of children understood heroism, that put a safety disclaimer in its opening credits, that embedded Superman into the American breakfast table, that ran 6 seasons across 2 formats. And it ended not with a send-off, but with a budget meeting going the wrong way and an actor who had simply had enough. The show deserved a better ending than it got. What it left behind, though, is undeniable. Adventures of Superman flew on trampolines, wore a brown suit, banned its own villains, and still managed to convince an entire generation that one man could make Metropolis safe before dinner. The machinery behind it was messier and stranger than the finished product ever suggested. Which one of these facts genuinely rewrote the show in your memory? The suit, the disclaimer, or the ending that never came? Drop it in the comments.